This is Radio TV Phono Nut, and we have two record players here. The tan one is a Crosley Stack-O-Matic, and then the one behind it over here, the black one, is a last generation Caliphone school phonograph. And notice the striking resemblance between the two, which tells us that both of them probably came out of the same crap hole. The Crosley Stack-O-Matic obviously has a record changer in it and a stereo amplifier. The Caliphone has a single play mechanism and has a mono amplifier. But like I said, I think we can pretty well safely assume that both of these came from the same factory. And I'm going to tell you, this last generation Caliphone, it is a far cry from even the last gasp idler wheel driven Caliphone record players that were made in China and use a DC motor. Those things are nowhere near what the older ones with an AC motor are, but they look high end when you compare it to one of these things. So we'll open up the Stack-O-Matic now. This one actually works. I was able to play a record on it, but the record changer has some problems. Mainly the spring here that is supposed to be under the overarm to provide tension has somehow worked loose, and so I don't know what happened here, but we're going to have to take that apart and try to fix it. These Stack-O-Matic changers are basically just an updated version of a BSR, with the main difference being the Crosley Stack-O-Matic changer has a plastic chassis where the BSR has a metal chassis, and the Crosley uses a DC motor belt driven drive system, whereas the original BSR uses a AC motor and an idler wheel drive system. But other than that, they're basically the same record changer. Now let's go get a screwdriver and get this thing open and see if I can fix this overarm here. Alright, here we are with the record changer removed, and as you can see, the underside of this looks just like a BSR, and I'll go fetch an old BSR changer in just a minute to show you. There's our little DC motor there, and at least this one uses a, come on, focus. At least this one uses a Matsushita motor, so it ought to be a bit better quality than some of the later ones with the Chinese motor in them. And this little circuit board here contains our plug-in, plug-on connector, which provides power and also is the audio cable for the amplifier. This little potentiometer here sets the 78 RPM speed, and 33 and 45 are adjusted by those two holes in the motor. L is for 33, H is for 45. And if you have to adjust one of these, start with 33 first, because that's the master speed that the other two are centered around, then go to 45, then go to 78. And here is our overarm. You see where the spring is all out of whack here. The spring should be down here, not up here. So I don't know what happened here, what somebody did to this. Have not seen the cat today, which is unusual. It's usually out by about this time, but I don't know where it is. Maybe it found a new place to dwell, or maybe it actually went home, or somebody picked it up. And if somebody picked it up, I hope it was the right somebody that'll give it a good home. And the more I look at this, I wonder if this was a factory screw up, because I just don't see how this could have wound up here on its own. Okay, here is a genuine BSR changer, and as you can tell, everything is basically the same under there except for the motors. And you can put one of these older BSRs in some of the Crosley Stack-O-Matics, but I believe you will have to cut a notch out of the motor board for the idler wheel assembly to fit right. Now I say some of the Stack-O-Matics, the ones that are just record players only, I believe the ones that have radio and CD and all that built into them have too much stuff in the way, and the AC motor hanging down will not let the changer fit in those particular models. But and then of course on these like this that run off of a wall wart, you would have to radically do some modifications to make everything work, as in building a DC power supply to go inside of the record player, replacing the wall wart plug with an AC plug, and then wiring it up that way, since the changer motor on the BSR is AC. And yes, you will have to cut a small notch out of the motor board here, because the idler wheel mechanism here, as you can see, is in the way. But that'd be all you'd have to do, just cut a little notch out here, and then this would drop right in there. This BSR here is an older one, probably from about 69, 70, 71, somewhere in there. Kind of crusty looking, so we're probably going to use it for parts. It's back when they still had 16 RPM on them. I think 73 was the last year for 16 RPM. For 74 they dropped 16, but they kept 78 up until about 81 or 82, at which time they dropped 78 and had the speed selector over on this side, I believe, in the function selector here. And I think that particular changer was made from about 82 to 84, when Capetronic bought out what was left of the original BSR, and that was pretty much the end of them. On this one we see where the spring is. It's down here at the bottom of the overarm, and it has that keeper on it to retain it in place. And then when you pull the arm up, that gives a little spring tension there. So yeah, I think the folks at Crosley just goofed up, and or not the folks at Crosley, all they are is just a sleazy importer, but whoever made that for Crosley just goofed up and put the spring in the wrong place. Now for a cartridge, this uses an AUE ceramic, which most of the earlier Stack-O-Matics used. The later ones from about 2009, 2010, right before they discontinued them, used the standard Chuo-Denshi CZ800 cartridge like all the rest of them used. If I can get this one working successfully, I'm going to remove this cartridge and replace it with one with a flip stylus for LP and 78. When I got this, the tracking pressure was about 5.6 grams. I adjusted this little adjustment here, which is just like on the older BSRs, and I was able to get it down to a little over 4 grams, so that's not too bad. I'm not saying this is a high quality record player by any sense of the word, but out of all the junk that Crosley made, this is probably one of the better ones, and I'll emphasize, and that's still not saying a whole lot. These Stack-O-Matic models, however, go for decent amounts of money on the used market if you're selling it on the right venue, especially eBay, because this was the last record changer ever made, and these have actually become collectible now. They were discontinued in about 2010, so you know, they hadn't been available in about 12 years now. So yeah, these are starting to become collectible, and people are paying, in my opinion, ridiculous amounts of money for them. You know, 150, 250. I've seen some go as high as 300 bucks. Let me just say, when I get this going, if somebody wants to buy this for 150, 200, 250, 300 bucks, I'll put it on them so fast they won't know what hit them. Here it is with the platter removed. You can see the belt here and the motor pulley, and this uses a plastic cycling cam gear. Most of the BSR changers used a metal gear for that application, except the last of the 3-speed models and the last generation 2-speed model. Those had a plastic gear. Alright, while we had the platter off, let's see what kind of shape this belt's in. If it's in good shape, I should be able to put it around the inner driving rim of the record changer platter and it stay in place. Okay, it is staying in place while the camera goes out of focus, but it's just barely staying in place, so this probably will need a belt in the not too distant future. And surprisingly enough, this center cycling gear thing that's made onto the turntable platter is metal. Somewhere around here I think I have another Stack-O-Matic changer that I salvaged out of one of the models that had a CD player and radio and all of that built in it. I recall it being dead as a doornail, and it was one that I intended on fixing, and whenever I attempted to troubleshoot it, the problem didn't just stand out and hit me in the face, and then it just got moved to the side and I forgot about it, and then I just got tired of tripping over it and I threw it away. So, you know, it don't take much to get me to throw a Crosley away. If I can fix it relatively quick and easy, I will, but if it requires a lot of troubleshooting effort, then I'm probably gonna put it out to the street. And in order to replace the platter on one of these, you stretch the belt over the belt. What am I thinking about? The department store. You stretch the belt over one of the little pegs here. They give you 2 of them, so take your pick as far as which one you want to use, and then place the platter over the spindle so that the motor pulley will land within this triangle here, and then work the platter back and forth a few times, and then you should hear the belt snap off of the peg and orient itself onto the motor pulley, and then make sure the changer works properly, and if it does, replace your retainer clip and you're good to go. Now, before we get carried away with the Crosley, I thought I'd show you the inside of the Caliphone. Only reason I brought it out here was to show you the similarities between the two, and as you can tell, this does use a standard single play turntable mechanism. This is the more upscale of the mechanisms used in modern record players, but still, that's not saying much. It has a 11-inch platter and auto return at the end of the record. It sounds, I guess, sort of okay, not great. Like I said, this is nowhere near the quality of even the last gasp idler wheel driven Caliphones. You have no metal corner protectors, you have no headphone jack, you have 3 speeds but no longer have the flip needle for LP and 78. You've got these cheesy little flimsy little controls here that feel like they'd snap off at the least amount of effort. I mean, even the last gasp rim drive Chinese models used real potentiometers and a metal motor board and a metal tone arm with an LP and 78 flip stylus. This one here runs off of a 12-volt wall wart, which is stashed in a little compartment in the back there. At least they had sense enough to do that. But yeah, you might remember I had a Caliphone similar to this, but I ended up EOLing it. I think I did a video on it. This one here is a little bit newer. I think the other one I had a spring suspended motor board. This one does not. The turntable is just mounted directly to a motor board here. The only reason I keep this is because this was literally the end of the line for institutional grade classroom record players. This was it. To my knowledge, nobody else was making these at this time. Caliphone was the last one, and of course by that time it wasn't really Caliphone. They just farmed out production to some Chinese company, likely the same company who builds Crosley crap, and they just stuck their name on it. As you can see, they just have a peel off sticker on here that says Caliphone. And I think this was discontinued around 2017. And frankly, I'm surprised it was offered that long, because you know this was geared towards school use, and pretty much I don't know of any schools that were still using records as late as 2017. In fact, the local school district here ditched all of their records, I think around 2000, 2001, even though the teachers were still using them. But they came in and made the teachers turn in all their record players, and that was the end of them. And you may be asking, what did they do with all the Caliphones? Did they sell them? Did they give them away? No, they didn't do that. They paid a recycling company to destroy them. Now that makes good sense, don't it? You could have put them at an auction and sold them and made a few dollars off of them to go towards more worthwhile projects, but no, you have to pay somebody to get rid of them. You know, from what I found out, the local school district, they're very paranoid when it comes to surplus property. They can't stand the thought of anybody getting any use out of any of their old property. It just makes their blood boil. You know, I've got a Caliphone that I found at the flea market that actually has the name of my first grade teacher written on it. So naturally I had to pick it up, and I made the mistake of asking someone at the school district about old record players, and that's whenever I found out what they do with them. And I made the mistake of mentioning the one I had found, and he about went into meltdown. He just couldn't understand how that made it off campus, and you know, you're not supposed to have that, and blah 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 blah. And I smoothed it over by saying, well, maybe somebody threw it away, maybe it was no longer on inventory, so it just got dumpstered, or maybe it got sold at one of your auctions back when you still did that. So needless to say, if I ever find any more old AV stuff at the flea markets or wherever that came from the local school district, I'm keeping my mouth shut. I know back about a year ago the county schools had an auction, but from what I could see of the stuff there was nothing there I wanted. You know, just a bunch of 90s and early 2000s Chinese-y junk that I wouldn't want, not a record player to be found. And had I found a record player, it probably wouldn't have mattered, because generally the way they do stuff, they'll bundle a bunch of stuff together, and I might have had to have taken 3 school desks, a food warmer, and a old copy machine just to get the record player that I wanted. So that's really no good. Alright, enough babbling. Let's try to get Mr. Crosley fixed up and get it working for whatever that's worth. Alright, the thing I'm noticing about the old BSRs, we have an E-clip that holds this spring retainer in place. There's a little notch there in the post to accommodate the E-clip, which naturally it would have to be, because it wouldn't stay on if there wasn't a notch there cut into it. However, on the Crosley there is no place here for an E-clip, it's just smooth. So I may have to dig out the other Crap-O-Matic changer if I can put my hands on it, and that's the thing. Generally, whenever I don't need something, I can lay my hands on it. When I do need it, I can't find it to save my life, but if I can find that other changer, I can see how this is mounted and fix it back correctly. But this is definitely not right. This is too flimsy, so something got messed up here. And I think I already see how they're doing this. This metal piece is press fit down in here. And you can see now it doesn't wobble as much, and it's got more tension on it. So I need to go get a small screwdriver and push this down in here as far as I can, and then maybe it'll stay. Okay, I've got it pushed down in there as far as it'll go, and that's about as tight as it feels. Pretty tight. I feel like what happened, that whoever was using this probably got too carried away lifting up the overarm too forcefully, and over time it just pulled this up and it came loose, and that was that. So yeah, you got to be careful with this Chinese made cheap crap. It wasn't meant to be abused. Alright, I've got the needle guard down so nothing's going to get damaged. Let me run this through its cycle manually and see what it does. I'm on the 7-inch position. Alright, that looks good. Let's put the overarm down. Now it should turn off. Alright, I'm hearing a little squeak there, so we got to see what's rubbing and fix that. Probably lack of lubrication, but other than that, it seems to be working. Alright, 12-inch. Alright, that's good. 10-inch. Well, it would help if I flip the auto switch. Yeah, you hear that little squeaking sound. So yeah, we got to see what that's about and put some lubriplate on it or whatever. Something didn't get greased quite good enough from the factory apparently. Trying to listen to find out where this noise is coming from, and it sounds like it's coming from right here where the arm elevator lifts up and then the tone arm rubs on this piece here as it's moving back to the rest. That's where it sounds like it's coming from, so all I know to do to that is try to clean it up as best I can and hope for the best. Yeah, it's definitely this plastic piece rubbing on the metal lifter because I've got it in mid-cycle, and when I move the tone arm back and forth you can hear it rubbing, but whenever I lift up on the tone arm, it doesn't rub. So yeah, may not be anything we can do about that. I just sprayed a bit of contact cleaner on it, and that didn't solve the problem. Alright, I cleaned that post with the rubbing alcohol and the plastic part that rubs against it, and I think we got rid of the scraping sound. Yep, no more scrape. Yep, that works beautifully. Alright, so now I think we can put it back together and check our speed. We'll probably need to adjust that. These usually run a bit fast, and that's about the biggest advantage, or about the only advantage to this using a DC motor, is you can more easily adjust the speed, whereas older BSRs with an AC motor tended to run a bit fast, and the only thing you can do about that is to file down the motor capstan. But if you get carried away, you'll file too much off and it'll run slow. I think the reason BSR did that was to compensate for the weight of a record stack, whereas it might run a little fast with only 1 or 2 records. But if you have a stack of 5 or 6 records on there, that might load it down and make it run a little slower. So if they had it set, if they designed it to run at the correct speed or pretty near the correct speed with only 1 record, then it might run too slow with multiple records. But there again, that's just a sign of cheapness. They could have built a more robust drive system, but they didn't. But on the subject of BSR changers, yes, they have their shortcomings, but they were usually reliable and they did what they were designed to do. They were not meant to be hi-fi. They were meant to go in cheap console stereos and compact shelf systems, and they did what they were supposed to do. And their shortcomings as far as audio reproduction were generally not apparent when coupled with such a stereo. Now if you coupled such a record changer with a higher quality component system, then yes, you would probably be able to tell its shortcomings. Now that's not to say, now BSR made some higher end record changers that used basically the same mechanism underneath, but they used a 4-pole motor, a metal platter, and a nice counterbalanced tone arm with a magnetic cartridge. Some had a Pickering cartridge, some had a Shure cartridge, some had an ADC cartridge. It all depending on the maker of the stereo and what cartridge they wish to use. I've got a Fisher branded BSR changer like that uses a Pickering NP AC type cartridge, and I was using it for 78 use. Although it's starting to get some age on it, needs to be taken apart and cleaned and re-lubricated, so I really haven't used it much lately. Alright, let's put all this back in the box and see what happens. But before we do that, let's pull this panel off and give these pots a squirt. They were a bit scratchy when I tested this, and you know, I've got two Stack-O-Matics. I've got this one, and I've got the one in a wooden tabletop model that has a AC power cord on it. I used to have two like this one, but I ended up selling one locally. As miraculous as that is, I actually found someone who was interested in one, and no, I didn't get near about an eBay price for it, but I got my investment back, and that's all I was really hoping for. In this area, I'm doing good just to find somebody to be willing to pay me enough to get my investment back on this junk. However, this one here, I'm probably hanging on to it unless somebody wants to make me a handsome offer for it, and I don't look for that to happen, so I'll just fix it up and enjoy it for what it is with all my other record players. If I ever find another one like this one, or the AC operated table model that's cheap, I might convert it to use a standard BSR changer. I'll give you a look at the speakers and the amplifier and these puny little cheap pots. Now, these cheap pots are bad about becoming noisy, and if you clean them, they'll work for a little while and they'll usually get noisy again, but that's because they're just cheap pots. They're not like the old good quality full-size American made pots. Two 4-inch speakers. Like I said, this is a stereo model. Why it's stereo, I don't know, because with speakers this close together, you're really not going to get a whole lot of separation. The Caliphone uses the same type of speakers, except it uses a mono amplifier. They would have been better off using a mono amplifier on this one, and instead of two 4-inch speakers, they could have used something like a 4x10 or a 5x7 or something like that, and it would have sounded a lot better. Alright, let me try to get these pots out where I can get to them and give them a little spritz of cleaner, and maybe they'll stay quiet for a little while. Okay, we sprayed them, and hopefully they'll be quiet for a little while. But like I said earlier, these pots have a very, very cheap feel to them. And these are just ganged pots, which is two pots back to back, one set for tone, one set for volume, since this is a stereo model. The Caliphone is mono, like I've already mentioned, and it does not have ganged pots. It just has a single pot for tone and a single pot for off-on volume. Another common problem for this model and all Crosleys that use this type of rectangular DC input jack is the plastic mounting studs. You see where it screws in from the back into these plastic mounting studs that are part of the jack. Those mounting studs become brittle and break off, and then the jack is just dangling out the back of the record player. The way I fix that is I shear off what's left of the old broken mounting studs, and then I drill a couple of holes in the jack, one on top, one on bottom, and then I actually bolt the jack in place, and then it's not going nowhere then. Since this one's still okay, I'll leave it alone, but if it ever breaks, it'll be real easy to fix it. One thing I don't like, well, there's actually a few things I don't like about these, but one of the things I don't like is the way they have the off-on switch oriented. You've got a switch here that turns on the amplifier, and then there's a switch on the record changer that activates the motor on that, whereas in the old days the switch on the record changer activated the amplifier and the motor, so when the last record was finished playing, the record changer would switch off and kill the power to the whole set. Whereas this one here, it only kills power to the record changer motor itself. It does not kill the power to the amplifier. Now I realize this little puny amplifier is not drawing a lot of current, so I guess they figured no big deal, but still I think they should have designed it where when the record changer shuts off, it shuts off power to the amplifier too. Even your old 1970s all-in-one shelf stereo systems, most of them were wired where if you left the power switch on the set turned off and set the selector switch to phono, the switch on the record changer would control the power to the amplifier. So there again, as long as the main power switch on the stereo was off, the record changer would shut off the whole system whenever the last record was finished playing. And like for example the Magnavox console stereos and other brands of console stereos, when the selector switch was set to phono, there was no power going to the amplifier unless the record changer switch was turned on. Now somewhere around here, well actually I think I know where it is, I have a black plastic, well black front particle board cabinet with black finish on it, Sound Design AM FM stereo 8-track with dual cassettes, and I think that's probably one of the last all-in-one systems to contain an 8-track player, probably from around 86 or so. That particular system has a 12-volt output barrel style connector on the back for connecting to a record changer, and I remember well actually not a record changer, the ones that came with those were a single play mechanism with it was made by Capetronic, the ones who bought out BSR, and those particular turntables had a cord on them that would plug directly into the 12-volt jack on the back of the stereo. Well, if I can find the Stack-O-Matic changer that I have here on hand, I'm probably going to mount that in a BSR base with a dust cover and connect a suitable cable to that, and that way I can plug it into the back of that Sound Design stereo. That'll be one good use for that particular changer. Since it operates on low voltage, it'll work quite nicely with that little Sound Design system. There's still no sign of the cat, so I'm hoping it either went home and its owner is taking steps to keep it put up, or a responsible person picked it up and gave it a home. I hope nothing happened to it, but then again, the first time it showed up over here, it disappeared for several weeks before it put in an appearance again. And then it hung around over here for about a week, and now it seems to be missing in action again, or who knows, it could be asleep under my shop somewhere. Here's the cartridge that I'm going to install with a flip needle, the Fansteel P192D. I've started using this cartridge because these actually come with a proper LP78 flip needle. There is a Banpa branded cartridge. The part number escapes me at the moment, but there's several sites including eBay and a few other places on the internet that sell that cartridge for under 10 bucks, and it claims to come with an LP78 flip stylus. It's even labeled 78, but it actually does not. It comes with a dual LP tipped stylus, and you can replace that stylus with a BSR style needle, but by the time you order the needle and the cartridge, you've spent what it would cost just to order the Fansteel version that actually comes with the proper needle. And these track in the 2 to 4 gram range. I found they do pretty good around 3 grams, so I think we can get that record changer to track at that. Yeah, P192D, general purpose, come on focus, general purpose, BSR, Magnavox, and Universal, Fansteel stylus 274 DS73. made in USA. I seriously doubt that. I think at best this is was probably packaged in the USA but not made in the USA. And this cartridge will snap right in the existing head shell. And the pins on the replacement cartridge are slightly smaller in diameter, so I'm having to squeeze these connectors in ever so slightly with a small pair of pliers. And when replacing any cartridge, you want to be very careful when removing the cartridge connectors, because the wires can break off from them very easily. It's best to gently pry them off of the cartridge pins with a small flat blade screwdriver. Alright, now that we have everything crimped, we can get everything connected back, put our insulators back on, connect everything back up, and that cartridge will snap right in this head shell. Alright, here we are back installed. We have, isn't this a lot more convenient when you want to play 78s? Just flip the needle over to the other side instead of having to buy a separate needle for this cartridge and having to physically swap the needles around. Now, a lot of people have used these Banpa style cartridges like what I just put in this one in the Crosley Cruisers, but I found that the Crosley Cruisers track too heavy for this type of cartridge. I've seen it bottom the needle out, so really not really a good choice for those in the grand scheme of things. But at least on these you have an adjustable counterbalance spring that you can adjust to get it where you need it to be, so that's a plus. So we're going to put this back together, go get our strobe disc and our neon bulb, and see how this thing does as far as speed, and then we'll adjust as needed. And as far as this AUE cartridge, it will clip to a standard 1/2 inch mounting bracket, and I'll just hang on to it for future use. I might run into some junky record player that I don't want to spend any money on to resurrect it, and we'll just stick this cartridge in that. Now, a fan steel P226 would probably be the most ideal for this particular changer and the Crosley Cruisers, but this head shell is so narrow that P226 won't exactly clip in there without having to do some modification to the head shell, and I have done that on some Crosley Cruisers, but once again, if you get too carried away with the filing down, it won't fit right. And frankly, a Crosley Cruiser is such a cheap, junky record player that it's really not even worth the cost of a fan steel P226 cartridge. If you want to play 78s, there's a lot better options out there. Alright, we're on 33 and I have my neon bulb here, so what do we get? Yep, this thing's running a pretty good bit fast. 45. And same story with that. And 78 is running a bit slow. So yeah, this is going to need some adjustment. And whenever the time comes to replace the belt with a new one, we'll probably have to go back in and adjust it again. But this belt still has some life left in it, and I'm going to go ahead and adjust it for the way it is now. Alright, I did this off camera because I technically need 3 hands to do this, but I've only got 2, so you get the idea. Alright, I have 33, 45, and 78 adjusted. I have 3 different tools here. As you can see, an alignment tool and 2 sizes of flathead screwdrivers that I use on these motors. And I found that depending on who made the motor, you may need one of the 3 tools. No one tool fits all of them. But anyway, I have everything set. I did not set it dead on speed for reasons I've already mentioned, because weight of the records, weight of the tone arm, that's going to drag it down a bit. So I have it slightly pitched fast to compensate for that, but it's not pitched as fast as what it was. Now, you know, this is not some critical listening station audiophile record player here. I don't think anybody that's using one of these is going to be caring about audiophile results. So even though it's still pitched a little fast, I don't think most people will find it objectionable. But when I first tried this out off camera, when I first got this, even I could tell that it was pitched a little fast, so that's the reason I wanted to turn it down. Now let's go get some records and see how this does. Alright, here we are with 345s. Now you can use one of the older BSR stacking spindles on one of these as well. Not gonna let that play long because that one got me a copyright strike one time. Okay. Let's try that again. Loose fitting adapters, it won't stay in the center hole there. Alright, we need to adjust the set down position, so we'll do that right now. And I believe the set down position is this little thumb screw right here on the back. And I turned it in just a hair clockwise. That's better. Yeah, this thing sounds pretty good actually. Alright, I've got 6 LPs stacked on here, which I believe is the maximum number you can stack. And contrary to popular belief, these don't get damaged by doing it this way, for the exception of possibly rubbing on this plastic turntable platter. But as far as the records falling on top of each other, they have a raised lip here to prevent that from happening. Alright, let's see what happens. That's one. That's two. Three. Four. Five. And six. Yeah, that one's slipping a little bit. Yeah, I believe this record is a little warped. Alright, let's try that record one more time by itself. You know, sometimes records can have imperfections that cause and it would help if I turn the power on. But sometimes a record will have slight imperfections that will cause what you just heard. And see, now it's working fine. And those imperfections, I think, is another reason why record changers fell out of favor. That and the fact that CDs and cassettes were taking over, and you no longer needed to stack records to get hours of uninterrupted music. Now let's try some 78s. I have 3 of them stacked up here.
You ain't a rock champ, mama, but ooh, you rock so good.
Alright, it seems to be working just fine. Alright, I still have the 378s on the platter along with the strobe disc on top, and we're still running within spec. It didn't slow it down any, so I think we can put the screws back in this one and call it a day. Now, sometimes when I do record player videos, people ask me what I played, so I'm going to go ahead and tell you. Alright, 78s. If I can hold this up without knocking it out of the ratty envelope that it's in. Don't Sit Under the Apple Tree by Glenn Miller. Rocking Chair Boogie by Ivory Joe Hunter. And Bo Weevil by Darlene Zito. This is one of those cheap knockoff records. As far as 45s, All the Things You Are by Lena Cantrell. Little Dum Dum by John Fred and his Playboy Band. And Hey Girl Come and Get It by the Stylistics. And as far as the LPs, Midnight Cowboy, taken from the very best of Ferranti and Teicher. Funky Stuff by Kool and the Gang. When Will I Be Loved by Linda Ronstadt. Louis Ledoux by Carnival, whatever that is. That's not really one I'm familiar with. And Sugar and Spice off of the Jack Wild album. And Jim Photoglow, Fool in Love with You. Yeah, I could open up my own oldies station with all these records I got over here, and I could play a better variety of music than what most oldies stations play as well. But even though this sounds acceptable, I mean, it's still not great. I mean, that Motorola One Tube Wonder that I showed yesterday, it would probably sound better than this thing does if it were working properly. But this one still sounds better than some of their products. And I think I could probably make this one sound better, and we might undertake that project one day when we have more time, but that ain't today. I just wanted to get this thing working properly and put a more suitable type cartridge in here for playing LPs and 78s without having the hassle of flipping or removing needles and changing them around. And with the volume all the way up, you can tell that we have a hum that sounds like a faulty ground, and that seems to be a common problem on these too, so we might try to address that one day. And if I could beef up this amplifier a little bit and make it sound a little better, then you know, that's a big plus right there. Oh, before I go, let's check the tracking pressure, and we'll add this number to 5, so we're tracking at 5.8 grams. So let's try to lower that some, and I believe turning the thumb screw clockwise lowers the pressure. Correction, turning it counterclockwise lowers the pressure, and I was able to get it down to 5.4 grams, which is a little heavy for this cartridge, but that's about as good as I can get it. I think this cartridge obviously weighs more than the one that came out of it, so that's the reason the other one I was able to track it at about 4.5 grams. So turning it all the way in moves our tracking up to about 8 grams, so this thing has a range from about 5.5 to 8 grams, so we want to keep it towards the low end. Well, it's not bottoming out the cantilever like it's done in some of the cruisers that I put this cartridge in, so that's fine. As long as it's not bottoming out, I'm not too concerned about it. Wait a minute, maybe that was Star on a TV show that I played the first time on this 45. It's backed with "Hey girl, come and get it." Getting old, can't remember what I played and what I didn't play, but here's the Caliphone with its off-balance platter. The amplifier, I think, is a little bit more robust in this one, but the sound quality is about the same as the Crosley Cruiser. And this one also uses an AUE cartridge like the Stack-O-Matic. I don't have this turned up very loud because I don't want anybody coming out here telling me to turn it down, so. But yeah, I think the reason these sound a bit on the tinny side is because the amplifier input is not properly impedance matched for a ceramic cartridge. That's the reason there's virtually no bass on these. So one day we may open these up and build a little circuit that will take care of that. This Caliphone certainly doesn't have the robust sound that the older Caliphones had back when they actually knew how to properly design a phono amplifier. But unfortunately, all the engineers and designers who designed all that old stuff are largely no longer with us, and nobody even gives it any thought anymore as to how to properly design an amplifier that will work with a ceramic phono cartridge. See if the auto return works on this. Yeah, it works. Well, I was hoping our little friend would come out and visit with us, but I guess not. All I can say is I just hope she either went back home or fell into the hands of a responsible person. And the battery's about to die. Perfect timing.